has left a gang and is now trying to join the military. So you can see that both of these are groups. Comanoma values in these groups, they are they are outside of being different. So you re-socialize yourself. They'll have to go through a period of socialization where they learn the different norms and values of the military. So there are two possible outcomes of resocialization. The first is that differences can be resolved and the individual becomes a full member again. So this is going back to this is going back to the maintenance stage, where you have gone outside of the maintenance stage and you have been part of that group to retain values that are relevant there. But when you are looking at resocialization, you resolve the issues that you have identified that are different from your levels of values, and you become a full member of that specific group, or the group expels the individual or the individual decides to leave. Awawa zimena kuchita ndifeyo zimeti mapanga zikusiyana. We are choosing that you shouldn't be part of the group, or the individual amata kuona kuti ineyo the way that this group is moving forward and what is expected of me even after resocialization is something that as an individual I'll have a hard time adjusting to. So the key word here is adjusting to the expectations of that specific group. And the last stage is the stage of remembrance. So during the remembrance stage of socialization, former members talk about the memories that they had in a particular group after they have departed. Nthawi yoyo madziwa zimene zimakambidwa mchechi munthu akhona kuti wakhabona again kumene amazana kuti ineyo nthawi imene ndi wakudziko ndinkapanga mwakuti kuteko ndikamaona anthu ena kuti akupanga zimene ndimapanga ineyo zimangowamvera chisoni, right? You are remembering some of the characteristics that you experience when you are part of a different group. That is actually a very good example when you are looking at socialization. The experiences that people go through when they are trying to affiliate themselves with a certain religious body. So, and in the context of the example that we've been using, imagine that a person has left a gang and is now trying to join the military again, and they may talk about the experiences that they had in the gang. So they are talking about these experiences because they are trying to reflect on whether or not they learned from the previous experiences that they had. So if the group of the ex-group member reaches a consensus on the reason for departure, conclusion about the overall experience of the group becomes part of its tradition. So this concludes the stages of socialization. So as you can see, an individual goes through a specific channel for them to get to a point where they are indeed accepted or part of a social group. You become a part of a social group when you have gone through these stages and you have identified whether or not the group is actually going to be something that you identify in the long run with. So when you're looking at these stages of socialization, do you think that it's possible for a person to feel outside of their family structure? Do you think it's possible for a person to feel outside of their family unit or family structure? He said that it depends. It depends on what? In the context of socialization, right? Yes, it depends on what? So nobody chooses their family, right? Umango bado ako kwanuko ukabado ako. So we go back now to the nature thing, right? Umabezona kuti ukafika size yotu kuzindikira, right? Umaona kuti zimene zikuchitika pa khomba nopa ndi ineyo zimakhanga wina kulowera uko wina kulowera uko, right? So a person can go through the socialization of a family, as we put it, primary socialization. So as he's saying that it depends that a person can feel outside of their family, because normally when we look at primary socialization, makolo amakuuzani their values and culture and so on. The time that a person goes through a moment where they feel that they are not part of the values and the norms of the household is when they feel that they are different from what is expected of them. Inuyo kwanu mukapita ababa mukaweloko school they expect naye kuti ntchito zimene zatsaba khomo muthandizire nawo panopa ndi nthawi yolima mwina banga expect naye kuti ikakhala mvula ikagwa mukadzale iwo kuno ineyo izi zikundivuta, right? And then maybe you look at something like amaukakamiza kupita ku school. Ineyo nkhani zophunzira zinu maziona ngati ndizopanda ntchito, right? So we go back to the issue where a person experiences the stages of socialization and they take into consideration the types of socialization, where after the primary socialization has occurred and you start to experience life outside of your family members and your siblings, mwapita ku school, mabangano take up characteristics that are completely different from the values that you were taught at home. Mapezona kuti zimene mwapanga ku school kuno ndi zimene mwapanga ku nyumba, mwina your parents can't even, identify you, right? So you should see that those are perspectives that would determine an individual in terms of how they develop a characteristic. However, even although a child or a person who is a teenager or going through phases of life might experience falling out of a group, particularly in a family structure, it is only prominent for them, for literature to determine that an individual has fallen out of a family structure when umafika muntu zaka 25, 30, 40, koma zimene amapanga kwawo ndi zimene amapanga yeye ndi zinthu zosiyana, right? They behave completely different, or even akakhala family gathering safuna kupita, they are unable to be part of the socialization unit of their family structure. So you can see that these not only the stages of socialization but also the types of socialization are going to influence a person's behavior and also influence their ability to be part of a social group. Any questions? Zamveka? Usati zikabwere pamayiso usati hayi madam simunaphunzise zimene ndankhula kwambiri. So now we are going to look at the cases of feral children. So the case of feral children is coming in from the premise of the concept of socialization. As socialization is a method in which an individual learns how to interact within a social situation. So this issue of case of feral children, there are several cases of feral children where a child grew up outside the socialization of human beings. So you've heard about the story of Tarzan, right? That cartoon, it's a movie also. You've heard about it, right? So it's based off of a relatively true story according to what happened to that specific individual. So you look at people where when they have been socialized outside of human beings, they develop animalistic characteristic. You wakula in a jungle, you have to mimic what you see as the survival tactics, right? As opposed to a human being. So the reason why socialization is very important, not only in human beings, but also when you are looking at the evolution of animal species, it gives for us the reference of how people adopt to their environment. So feral children have been seen to be growing up under unusual circumstances, giving them the ability to be more animalistic and being unable to develop human-related characteristics. So this case of feral children gives to us again the nature and the nurture debate, right? Where we are saying ngati muntu wakula in a jungle and they have become more primate and more animalistic. It means they are mimicking what is expected of them. when they go out of this situation, they sort of have to be re-socialized, as a term, to be more human. So it has been found through literature that and investigation that children that grew up outside of socialization of human beings have a hard time readjusting to what being a person or being a human being is supposed to be, including their level of socialization. So this is coming in because when we go back to the types of socialization, Tanena, what is the first contact point of an individual is your family and your most closest community. So when you are looking at that, it structures an individual's perception, their level of thinking, and also the way that they can contradict the society that surrounds them. So when a child grows up in an unusual circumstance, particularly within a wild domain, and they become more animalistic, by the premise of us human beings being also part animal, they move towards the animal perspective of what a human being is, and they do not develop the abilities to interact well. So you've heard of the term that says that man is a social animal, right? We've talked about this. So the socialization that occurs between human beings is different from that of other animal species because the level of interaction, the rules of engagement, as we put it, in the way that we interact with one another are very prominent in developing our expectations and the way that we are expected to behave in a certain situation. So the story of the cases of the fairy child gives to us a narrative of how, as human beings, we generally become what we are because of the environment that surrounds us, particularly as we are being continuously exposed to that specific environment. So this concludes socialization. We have talked about the types of socialization, and we've also talked about the stages of socialization, making reference to the debate of nature versus nurture, and also the nature versus nurture giving to us the narrative of the feral children. So this understanding of socialization summarizes the differences between individuals based on their natural genetic makeup and the differences between individuals based on the environment in which they grew up or what they are continuously being exposed after birth. So in this next topic that we're going to look at is the group formation. Group formation. So when you're looking at socialization, the process of socialization that occurs, we had talked about the process of socialization coming in because we develop specific groups that we interact around. So you develop those characteristics based on the group that you are constantly and prominently surrounded by. So groups and group dynamic give to us an explanation of how a group is formed and the level in which the interaction occurs. I would suppose that the group dynamics would make specific sense when you're looking at the process of the process of socialization. So for an individual to be part of the group dynamics of group formation, it means they first of all go through the socialization process. So this maybe would have come before the socialization, but it's okay because we have talked about it in the same lesson. So the nature of a group and group formation and interaction in groups as well as group structures have been prominently cited of the Ashcard experiment on group formation and group interaction. So by definition, a group is any number of people with similar norms, values, expectation, who interact with one another on a regular basis. So a class would automatically become a group. because you are learning the same type of lessons, for example. So a class would mean kuti munapanga not year 1 semester 1 or year 1 semester 2, you automatically become a group because you have regular interactions and you also share similar norms and values in terms of your expectations in that particular group. So a group, whether a family, a gang, a business organization, a political party, or society, has the following characteristics. The first characteristic of a group is that members interact with each other over any period of time through words, gestures, writing, and music. So the key aspect there is the member interaction. So to be part of a group is that you need to interact continuously, sharing your norms and values as well as expectation. The second characteristic is that each member identifies with a group and it recognizes as part of the group by the members. So you identify as being part of a group, and subsequently that group recognizes you as being their member. You can't say as a primary group formation mechanism to be part of a group when that group does not recognize you. A very good example, if somebody maclass osokumakhono and hauphunzire amayima bakumwina wayiwala klasi imene akulowa amangoyima pakhombaja akasuzumira aona kuti nkhope izizi imene ndimaphunzira nazo that person automatically leaves and finds a familiar face that represents to them that group identification. And the third is that each member has certain responsibilities. In regards to a family, for example, a business organization, even a political party, it is prominent or expected that each member has got certain responsibilities. For example, in a family, aliyense amagawana kunoti pakhomo ngati panja sivanasesedwa amakhala kuti zimene amainopanga ndi unyunyu zimenezo ndikuti ngati sivanapangidwe choncho, it is the responsibility of that specific individual. Sharing of those responsibilities is what brings in a group cohesion. It brings in harmony, and those responsibilities when they are properly gone through, it promotes that the group becomes successful in terms of the objectives that it has put into place. There is specialization in activities, others lead and some follow. So in every group, it is not possible for everyone to be a follower. There sort of has to be either a silent or a prominent lead or followership, where uyuyu ndamene amapanga lead as inzake. For example, in a business organization, we would have the CEO as an overall leadership authority in that institution. We have the managers that have got subordinates in their institution. So the Ashcard experiment tests group conformity, where people follow what others have said for fear of being ridiculed or laughed at. So after looking at this characteristic of group formation, we identify that generally when people are part of the group, they have conformed to the group expectation. They develop characteristics that are expected within the group formation. So for example, you would have, in the previous lesson I gave an example of dominant characteristics or dominant culture. So an individual would create within that group what is expected, and all other people would conform. So that conformity is based on the leadership that is prominent in that group formation. So there are two types of groups. There are two types of groups. The first is the formal group. So by definition, formal, it means that it is something that has been created with purpose and has got a structure with legal framework. So a formal group is formed under organizational structure by the virtue of management decision. For example, you would create a formal group where in an institution such as this would have a group ya accounts, you would have the academic group such as the lecturers, you would have the management group which are part of the administration. So formality within that group is based on the organization structure. The structure is coming in on the levels of formal groups that originate within the same function. As we've put it, that a characteristic of a group is that they should have the same values and operate within the same framework. So its members are selected by management and are required to assume certain roles. So this would mean in many organizations where amapanga appointant. So in an institution, it would mean that people are employed to be part of a specific role based on their competencies. So it is formally formed group. Members of the formal group are selected according to their talents in order for them to do or come up with defined roles and undertake specific tasks. So if you are looking at somebody who is, for example, who accounts, right? That person is part of this institution because that is their level of talent and tasks. You cannot expect someone who is outside of those task specifications to be part of a technical job. So being part of a group represents the expectation and the function that is most prominent in that group. So the functioning of such group is governed by organizational rules, work assignments, and rational structure. So there are rules of engagement, as we put it in socialization. Rules of engagement determine kuti, for example, mugakhala mu group, how do you interact with each other? And there are subtle rules, or we can say subtle expectations that are placed on every individual. Work assignments would determine what is expected in those specific tasks and rational structure. The rational structure gives those work assignments who is responsible for which assignment. So, for example, the production department, the finance department, marketing, and etc. are part of formal groups of one overall institution. So, under the formal groups, we have the command group. The command group is based on a manager and those who are immediately under him. That is the key difference between this command group and the second one that we're going to talk about, the task group. The command group consists of a manager and set of his immediate subordinates directly reporting to him. It is specified by the organizational hierarchy. So the organizational hierarchy, as we put it, is that in every institution, tima zonoti, tima awawa, ndabwananga, that immediate supervisor. On top of him or above him, there is, for example, the manager. So that gives an organizational hierarchy. People that are directly responsible for others in their line of duty. It is relatively permanent group and undertakes certain regular activities of the organization. So for example, we would say that in an institution, if one specific function that is related to a specific group has not done well, muntu amene amafusa oyambirira is the one commanding all those under that specific station. So different group divisions would include things such as products, departments are examples of those command groups. They are examples of those command groups because they have an overall function of a command who is the person who oversees that specific department against those who are working within that specific department. And the second type of group of formal groups is the task group. So I have talked about a manager against those that he oversees. But in every department, there's usually tasks that are expected to be performed. So I'll give an example again with accounting, where anthu ena amapanga tingati my expenses, right? They are called bookkeepers. And when my financial statement, some are part of the management, the overall management of the accounting department. So these specific tasks are given according to the group of employees that are working together to complete that specific job or project. So it may or may not be part of the organization structure. This group may be composed of personal specialists, corporate vice presidents, and workers from a shop floor. So the reason why tasks are looking at creating outcomes of a specific function is that the key in those tasks are individuals who are relatively on the same level working towards a certain objective. So it doesn't mean that in a task group ndi anthu okhaokha amene mwina ndi anthu ongogwira ntchito, right? It would include maybe managers together working to achieve a certain task. It would include maybe corporate vice presidents working together to achieve a certain task. The key in those task groups is that they should be individuals who are working and have relatively the same level of skills and knowledge within for them to have deliverables in that specific task. So if it is formed permanently, it is called a standing committee. So the reason why it is called a standing committee is that normally when you are looking at something like a management committee in an institution, timadziwa noti mu management imakhala a vice kandi a chief executive officer, amakhala ma managers ama department ose, mathaso khala kandi wa marketing and so on by default. So even although muntu uja, let's say that person is no longer part of the institution, the fact that you are inhabiting that specific role, it automatically puts you part of that task group. So that is why it is called that it is formed permanently. And if it is formed temporarily for specific purpose, it is called an ad hoc committee, so or a task force in general. So when you are looking at this task force, we'll give an example of maybe the COVID-19 task force. It was given just as a specific committee who gobanga identify and hotanga gwire ntchito mu that specific task, but not as a permanent structure. So the examples of the task groups are the committees, the project groups, and task forces. So these are the two types of formal groups. And then we have, by obvious factor, is the informal groups. The informal groups are developed naturally among organizations, among employees without any direct direction from management. It is a voluntary and an official formation of relationships coming into existence by the virtue of some commonly shared background, needs, interests, values, and purpose. So when you are looking at an informal group, would be, for example, men's welfare by institution, Kabena women's welfare by institution, or when you are looking at something like people engaging in a cultural heritage group because they are coming in from the same region of that specific country. And also when you're looking at interests in addressing things such as fitness, it can address issues such as welfare of the institution, and also coming into consideration in terms of various social alliances. So the informal group emerges naturally by the virtue of that people seek in the organization some kind of social alliance. Anthu samangogwira ntchito mu institution kuti bora amagwira ntchito kandi department yo kapena iyo, but they want to engage with one another. For example, you've seen an institution where, or even in a group, in an informal group such as maybe you would be as part of students, and all those things. So people just generally seek social alliances. They seek to interact and create relationships on selective basis in the course of their association with their jobs. So the formation of the informal groups in the organization does not signal especially anything good or bad about the management practice. But in terms of group formation or being part of an institution, people generally have to interact and create, we would call them as secondary bonds within the institution. It is an important part of life of the organization. Friendship can bind people together and help them to cooperate with each other. So the first informal group is the interest group. The interest group are formed to share common interests in some job-related events or possible outcome. It is informal or non-structured group. It emerges to pursue a specific goal and share a common interest. So the key thing about this informal group is that they share a common interest. Some common interest areas include things such as structuring of my employee holidays, sports, library activities, overtime facilities. For example, and we in an institution will come together to sort of develop a structure kuti akakambirane, for example, dima management groups in terms of, let's say, drama ya overtime. Anthu amakhala limodzi ndi kukambirana nkhani. That is an interest group that is part of an informal group because it has not been structured by management. Employees form interest groups to promote their common interests. So I'll give you an example where in an institution where when you're looking at nkani ya overtime, do you think a person will be part of this interest group ngati iye samagwira ntchito overtime? Agati ma members awuzana pa WhatsApp group, guys, tikumane nkhani ya overtime. Ngati iye sagwira overtime abwera, they will not be part of that interest group, right? Komano only when chinthu icho chikumukhudza iyeyo directly according to that job related event. So this, you see that these interest group are formed based on the interest of that specific group that has been formed. And the second and last type of informal group is the friendship group. So by obvious, in every institution, people develop bonds of social affiliation. Amayamba kukhala lese umene kuti abwana aja ndi nzanga, between anthu okuti agwira ntchito mu department imodzi, munthu okuti abwana ndi nzake ni munthu oti abwana wamangu awo noti ndi abwana. The way that they interact becomes different, right? Mapeza noti ngati abwana amaine usaini yachina chake amamusainira munthu amene ujaifoti njani ndoti amachezera limodzi, as opposed to an individual who they are just interacting. So those or that is an informal group because by default, if an employee and a manager become friends, they become part of a friendship group. But they are also part of a formal group where they are doing they are part of that command group by default, where it is an employee and their manager. So friendship groups are formed in an organization because of the social affiliation needs of the members, such as needs of belonging, affiliation, and acceptance. Mwina anapita school limodzi, mwina kapena they are coming from the same village or the same district and so on. So employees having common characteristics such as age, ethnic group, political sentiment form friendship groups within an institution. Excuse me.
Task two types of form groups. Task. And don't need anything. Task. Tell you what else. Command. There were some types of socialization. Remembrance. And also socialization. 04. Investigation. Observation is what? Observation. How to socialize? How to socialize? Madam Sagan. What I mean is, what I mean is, are they taking the types basically what you have to socialize? And that's the sociology. I'm like year semester in some, I mean like next semester. Next semester na sote na mani analysis ni so
Pushing key fails with the name of the man.
Let's try your program as a
So between the formal and informal groups, we are able to see that it gives a reference on how people can be within that group. Because there is a sense of achievement, and also when you are looking at the difference between informal and informal groups. Obviously, in formal groups, some have expectations that are being attached in regards to, for example, employment. For department, some have tasks, that are within, for example, the payment, right? And also, so those things determine whether or not a person will be more committed in those group tasks, as opposed to things such as friendships. In the line of friendships, within that formal, that informal group, which is bringing characteristics of affiliation, and also that brings in characteristics of belonging and the ability of an individual to be falling within the desired outcome of that specific friendship. Meaning that you can stop being friends with them and start having another friend, right? There's generally a form of group where you can divide the new allowance. You can also see what market, right? They are within the specific skills that the person has. While in friendship groups, people just become part of an affiliation and they can live based on interests that are not being fulfilled. So having looked at these types of groups, they express the changes that occur between the informal and formal group perspectives. So before someone becomes part of the group, there is a process again or stages that they have to go through in order for that group to actually form. So now we're going to talk about the 5 stages of group formation. So according to Tuckman, he has coined 5 main stages of the process of formation, and they are known as the Tuckman's 5 stages of group development. So these stages of formation are meant to be followed in an exact sequence, and they are as below. They are followed in that exact sequence because of the stages, as we are putting it, that the specific group members have to go through in order for the final group to actually be part or being registered as being a group according to the affiliation that is occurring between those group members. So the first stage is the forming stage. The stage of forming, or some would call it forming stage. So this is the beginning stage, and it lasts only a few days or weeks. So members begin by planning their way and their new roles. Moreover, the emotions here are usually positive. The group should begin by learning about the team process in preparation for the rough times ahead. So when you're looking at group forming, we're not looking at it specifically in just people who are part of the formal group, but they can also be part of an informal group. For example, as you start your learning here and you have just started the very first day, as being part of the group of the semester and the year that you are in, you have to go through planning and work. For example, you discuss and come up and okay, the currently class representative, what is the expectation of everyone, and so on. So this group should begin by learning about the team process in preparation for the rough times ahead. So in specific organizations, they have a process of preparation in regards to the activities that they are expected to perform. So for example, in a command group, a command formal group, they have a process in which they must perform ahead, looking at maybe the expectation of that specific department in regards to production or a specific function within that institution. However, it is critical for them to learn the aspects of conflict resolution, communication, group decision making, and time management. So this group forming, particularly when you're making it with reference to people who have just initially been part of a specific group, they have to learn the expectation of each individual and also understand how they can resolve conflicts, assuming or knowing that generally in every group there has to be a level of conflict where people are not agreeing. And also how groups can make decisions and they can manage their time.
The second stage of group formation is storming. So by the word just means the level of conflicts or frustrations that are experienced. The storming stage, when you're looking at individuals who are just firstly interacting, when they firstly interact, they're usually positive about where their group is going. But when you start talking about your individual expectations, when you start exhibiting your actual characteristics, people are prone to having fights and arguments based on what is expected. So, for example, I say, a group of I am always should point out their views. And we now have to only hear and pull about me to see anything of me. So, this creates arguments and level of frustration and also can create resentment and anger. So, people experience this because amakanga kuti anthu interact with kumasani ziwani bwino kuti onizangayi amapanga interact in that way. So for example, there are some people where they usually become negative and they so that would be something that is not acceptable to everyone and that can create frustrations. And the job remains usually undone. And whatever that group is about and they're experiencing fights. So managers also experience frustration and are worried about a situation such as this, where within a group situation, members are unable to be harmonious in their group activities. Members experience a dramatic emotional roller coaster from elation to depression. So the experience that people feel when there is argument within that group. Moreover, the situation seems bleak. Usually, the storming period may last 1 or 2 months. It can even last even longer than that. How long have you been part of this? So this has been what? They must be somewhere around the 10th or 11th weekend or somewhere there in terms of learning. So this is the semester that you first of all started interacting as part of a group or maybe and also part of a specific course. So that can obviously bring factors of fights and arguments between people that can agree based on different situations and also those that would want their views to be taken up by the entire group. I will right? Something like that. People can experience, they feel a level of frustration and they express their level of frustration within that group. So amafika kwenye in that moment maziwana kuti akuwawa isamafika kapena ulikamana shouldn't get to a level of that point. So you find that even in one specific group, there are subgroups within that group where maybe 2 people, three people, but as part of one big group, you just want to function in order for you to achieve those specific goals in the long run. But the storming phase usually lasts a specific period that causes the actions of that specific group to not be done. So without effective training and support, the team may experience retarding growth. So assuming that this class has one specific goal, if the storming phase is not properly conditioned, you find that that specific goal is affected in terms of how the group is going to function in their individual goals. So it is important to note that conflicts are usually frowned upon, but it is inevitable for a group to have conflicts. In fact, conflicts are expected in a group and they form ways in which the group can develop and strengthen their cohesion. It is critical for a group to handle it well because they are a great help to building skills and confidence for the next stage. So the conflict stage identifies my strengths, my weaknesses, and in terms of working together. So that is the second out of the 5th stage of group formation. The 3rd stage is the norming stage. Wadziwana, you have developed your conflict, then you come up with ways in which you can go around your conflictual abilities.
So in the knowing stage, the group works through individual and social issues. The group establishes its own norms of behavior and begin to trust each other. So we are looking at ways in which certain norms are created on how interaction is going to move forward outside of the conflictual process. So moreover, the group develops interpersonal skills, it becomes all the more skilled. So interpersonal skills, I have interpersonal skills. It means that you have the ability to interact with people differently, right? But interpersonal skills can be challenged in group formation because normally with interpersonal skills, have you ever been exposed with those specific people that can make you indeed be have those interpersonal skills? So in group knowing, you further develop the interpersonal skills in, we call it the Uronilan, right? Kabila in English, we call it compromising. How you can compromise in that group to develop better skills to interact better with one another. So members begin the art of knocking of problem solving. Makangana Zaka, you have developed methods in which the group is going to move forward. Okay, guys, some of you even in the group, you say, okay, fine, this guy should not get to the point where you're insulting each other. Everyone should express their dissatisfaction in the most best manner as possible. They also cross-train and learn new adequate job skills. This stage usually lasts up to 4 or 12 months. So the learning stage allows for group members outside of the conflict to develop skills and adequate problem-solving capabilities to achieve the goals of that specific group. So this is assuming that a group has got one specific goal. So now they're developing skills to ensure that without making number of 1 or 2 months, going back and forth, we need to we need to go over those months by doing our work in the most possible outcome. That way we have the outcome in the period that is expected of us. So for example, we go you give a campaign time. That soon within 1 month, the deliverables have been affected in the timeline of the project. And stage number 5 is performing. So you have developed skills, you have developed or you have created norms or rules of engagement. You now have the performing stage, where everyone begins to perform in their respective tasks and assigned functions. This stage, the group has become well acquainted with each other and has clarity with regards to what needs to be done in the long run. Everyone has got expectation. So, for example, in a specific function, if I don't do my job accurately here, it affects the overall outcome of the entire group. So the performing stage begins when the group is comfortable to work and ends when the job is complete. The performing stage is just the acceleration of the group activity. And the last stage of group formation is the adjourning. So this is just recess, dismissing the group. So post the performing stage, which is after the performing stage, the group must be dismissed. And the adjourning stage ends the process of group formation. So this is assuming that in that group, task has been achieved. So that is not, for example, in a command meeting. In a command group, for command group, Himakab is continuous. Makandi says 6 months, Mamaliza Chiko, master another 6 months, and you continuously go. But when you are looking at this group information where you are looking at, for example, a specific task or an interest. So particularly these two groups, a task group and an interest group, there has to be an end process of that group where everybody goes back to their specific functions outside of the group. Because the group is adjourned once the task has been assigned to the group is complete. Ngati mwakambirana zona kuti overtime mbele, overtime wanderali sambuya mkwani yake, mwakambirisa what is supposed to do. And when you are looking at the tasks, when the task has been complete, you might be assigned to other tasks in that command group again. So these are the 5 stages of group formation. Any questions? So having talked about group formation, generally in groups, people will develop characteristics through resocialization, organizational socialization to conform to the characteristic of that group in order for them to be more acceptable in the group. So as I put it in group formation, the most prominent and cited experiment is the Ashcad experiment. So the original experiment was conducted with 123 male participants. Each participant was put into a group of 5 to 7 members. So they grouped the individuals. The participants were shown a card with a line on it, which is called the reference line. So assuming it is a line that represents what you want to compare with in the long run. So that is the reference line. Followed by another card with 3 lines on it labeled A, B, and C. So the participants were then asked to say out loud which out of the 3 lines match to the length with the reference line. So this means that by visual representation, so a total of 123 in groups of 5 to 7. So maybe this would be 13 groups. So out of 13 groups, they are shown first card, which has got a line in it. So assuming this is the line, right? First card. And so this is called reference card. And they are shown a second card with 3 lines on it. A, B, C. So line A, line B, and line C. So it means that each group has members of 5 to 3, they are shown, and they are expected to say after. Only card in this second card. This is the second card. Line in different line in reference video akushusana group. And you are expected to say your answer as a group. They will never that you. So so that person tries to convince all of you whether I want to write that A. Because of the dominant characteristic. I don't want to much yes, even the group yes, automatically all of you say the group first group will say line number A is the one that is and the reference line, right? I mean, so as a person who is observing what you are saying, but you find that the answer from that maybe group number 1, group number 2 out of 30, more of the members of the group, they are giving wrong answers because they are conforming to what the majority of the group is saying. Is that making sense? So, as I'm putting, the participants are asked to say out loud. That is the first thing. They are making reference to the card. And the second thing that they're making reference is, they will ask the group to say, for example, who could and A4? This one, which line is it more closest? So people start to argue again within the group to try to give the closest answer to what they are being asked. So you can see that according to Ashcad, he was trying, Ash, which is the card experiment, he was trying to develop an understanding of body and answers in the group and how are they influenced. So the first 2 trials, the subjects who feel at ease with the experiment, as he and the other participants gave the obvious correct answer. So the first thing that they observed is that those subjects that felt at ease, they didn't feel like they were under pressure.